Welcome to Our Last Meal, the podcast on grief, loss, and food. I'm your host, Andrew, and every episode, I talk with a guest about the grief of someone special that they've lost, framed around the foods and meals that meant the most to them. Before I get into the normal part of the show, where I introduce you to my guest, I have to take a moment to just stop and acknowledge and appreciate the fact that this is officially the 1-year anniversary of Our Last Meal. I am so grateful to anyone and everyone who has joined me on this journey for the last year. Anyone who's been a guest, anyone who's listened, anyone who's told somebody about this show, I can't tell you how much that means to me. I've mentioned this to multiple people that I've interviewed, that doing this show has really been a labor of love. This is really a passion project. And I know that might seem odd, the idea of a passion project that is about grief and loss. But it's really important to me that, we have these conversations. And anything I can do to encourage honest conversation, I think is important. So I am incredibly proud of this show. I am incredibly proud of what I've done so far and for what's coming. I've got a couple really interesting interviews in the can already. I can't wait to share those with you. I have more interviews that I'm working on scheduling, and I've got even more interviews that I'd like to try to make happen. I'm so appreciative to everyone who's been involved, and if you're one of those people who's joined me as a guest, sincerely, thank you so much. If you are someone who listens, be it to every episode, be it to some episodes, if you're listening in real time on May the 17th, or if you're listening 6 months in the future, 4 years in the future, thank you. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you listening. I appreciate you letting me share these conversations with you. I cannot say that enough. I cannot stress that enough. Thank you. I cannot wait to see where this show goes. I am hopeful that it will continue to grow, and I am just hopeful that it helps people in some way, whether it's the guests that join me and are able to talk about their loved ones, or whether it's somebody who just listens and it helps them through whatever they're dealing with. I hope that you find something in this show. With all of that said, again, thank you for 1 year. I am very proud of it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you will continue to enjoy it. That's enough about me going on about myself. I want to switch the focus back to what always matters the most to me, which is my guests. My guest this week is a certified grief coach, Jennifer Landon of Your Grief Matters. And we spoke about the importance of understanding grief in the workplace, something I think that is taken for granted. And I am so glad that people like Jennifer are out there doing good work around that. We also spoke about the effect that grief can have on safety. Safety is something near and dear to me. I am a firm believer that, we can do as much as we can to try to improve safety, try to put a focus on safety. I firmly believe in trying to get people home every day the same way that they left the house, in as safe a manner as possible. We also spoke about the idea of pre-grief, and you'll learn more about that in the episode. Jennifer shares some great resources, and I'm going to link to those in the show notes, so please take the time to check those out. I will give a content warning up top, just like I always do. The show does talk about death, so please be mindful as you listen. If it's something that's sensitive for you, just be aware going in. With that said, though, I hope you enjoy the episode, and thank you again for staying with me for a year. Hello and welcome to Our Last Meal. I'm your host, Andrew, and my guest this week is Jennifer Landon, Vice President of Education and Workforce Development for the Associated Builders and Contractors of New Hampshire and Vermont, Vice President of the Granite State Chapter of the National Association of Women in Construction, and she'll be joining me today in her role as a certified grief coach. Jennifer, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have you on. You know, we were talking before we got started recording, before all the technical issues, just about just how much experience you have here and just the approach that you've taken into grief. So I want to jump in because I'm excited to hear more about this because you talked to me a little bit about grief in a professional setting. Can you talk to me about the work you do there, why it's important to you, and what it looks
Sure.
like?
So I think what I'd like to do is kind of start off as to the why. When you look at, I work for a national trade association that is focused primarily on commercial and industrial construction. I
Yeah.
coordinate education and training, talk about careers in construction, et cetera, et cetera. The grief work actually came about because part of my role is I teach a leadership class. A colleague of mine co teaches the leadership class with me. Her name is Sue. And Sue told me a couple of years ago, she said, I think I'm going to be getting ready to retire. So we were starting to train somebody else to take her position as our business consultant in the leadership training program that we offer. Um, in June of 2022, June 8th of 2022, I learned that Sue's son, Captain Nicholas Peter Losapio, um, his Osprey went down in a military training accident, and Nick and four other
Mm,
Marines lost their lives in a desert in California. So
that's
you
horrible.
can imagine that really kind of rocked Sue's world. And fast forward, I did what you're supposed to do. I was calling, sending texts, just wanting to make sure that she knew that I was still there for her. So I think it was in September that same year. Sue, I was talking to her on the phone, and she said, "I'm really struggling. I need additional support." She was having a hard time finding a counselor. Now, the TAPS program with the military, very supportive. She had tons of support. She and her family had tons of support through the military. She did have some EAP through her company, but she was looking for a counselor. The one counselor that she had said, she just talked about herself the whole time, and that wasn't any good. She did have another counselor that she found was really good, but she was having to pay out of pocket, and so she was just feeling at a loss. So I decided to ramp up my game, and I started to look for all of these different resources, and I started kind of bombarding her with podcasts and articles and TED Talks and GIFs and you name it. I'm sending her anything that I can and figuring she will look at what she wants to look at when she's ready. And if she looks at that information at all. So as I was doing my research and kind of bombarding her with all of this information, I happened upon a grief coach certification training program, and I thought, well, I'd never heard of this, no idea. So I looked into it, contacted the founder, and just had a quick conversation with her, saying, I'm not looking to add this to my repertoire of counseling. I want to help my friend. So she basically said, affirmation, affirmation, what you're doing, you'd be a great fit for the program. So I went through the program. It's called From Grief to Gratitude, and it's certified through the International Coaching Foundation. So I knew it was a legitimate program. Part of the program required we have a pro bono client. And I thought, this is perfect. So I scheduled a time to have a conversation with Sue. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, with the exception of my husband, because I figured he should know why am I taking all of this money out of our bank account. And obviously, he supported me in doing that. So I scheduled a time to have a Zoom call with Sue to let her know what I was doing and to give her first rights to be my pro bono client. We scheduled the appointment or the meeting, and that afternoon, she sends me a text. And she said, I won't be on the call. It's a bad day. So I thought about it for a split second, and I responded and said, that's exactly why I need you on the call. I'll see you at 3 o'clock. She got on the call,
Yeah.
and she was having a griefy day. It was not a good day, and I said, this is what I'm doing. I'm going through this grief coaching certification program. I have to have a pro bono client, and I'd like to give you first rights. And she said, that's fine, as long as you know it's not going to help. I said, okay. If nothing else, this forces us to spend an hour together every week for the next 5 weeks. And she's like, that's fine. So kind of fast forward, I we met every week. It was more than an hour because both of us are talkers. Um, and you know, for your listeners out there, you don't get over grief, right? And there's no magic that happened in 5 weeks by any stretch. Basically, what I did is I listened, gave her a few tools to think about, asked her some questions that really kind of made her think and process. And one of the best compliments that she gave to me was she got more out of our time together than she did with the quote unquote professionals. It may have
Yeah.
to do, maybe with our friendship, I don't know. So, that one of the things that she said that really kind of sat with me during our conversation was, I can't go back to work. And I thought, why? Like, what is it? Now, Sue is a professor. Actually, she's just retiring in a couple days. So, but she's a professor at a local university. And I said, why can't you go back to work? And this was more in my head. I'm thinking, what's the why behind this? And she said, it's going to be too difficult. Okay, why? Well, because everyone knows my children. Everyone knows Nick. He's an Osprey pilot. That's a cool job. Her daughter has this amazing career in marketing. She's like, everybody knows my kids. My students know my children. All of my colleagues know my children. It's just going to be too difficult. So that got me to thinking, why? And and the one word that just keeps coming up over and over again, it's awkward, right?
Yeah.
Grief is awkward for everyone. It's awkward for the person who's on their grief journey, and it's awkward for everyone else.
Yeah.
So that's why I got to thinking, I think I need to do something with this. And so that's how this ties in with my position with construction. I I really want to be able to have these conversations with organizations and individuals to talk about what is it that we need to do to support people who are grieving. And we have to keep in mind that grief is more than loss of life.
Yes.
Grief encompasses so much more. And if we're not aware that somebody's grieving, how is it that we know that we can support them? So, we think about it, we tend to keep a lot of information to ourselves. So, I'm trying to get the word out there, like talk to people, let people know that something's going on in the construction sector, and like construction, mining, manufacturing, anytime that you're operating some type of equipment, there's a risk. So if you're grieving, you are a potential safety risk.
Yeah.
So if I'm able to go onto the job site and say, I've got some stuff going on, everybody else, if they can just have that compassion and empathy and to look at that and say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I check in with that person on a regular basis. Just checking in to make sure that they're okay. We do a tremendous amount of work, and I can only speak for construction. We do a tremendous amount of work in our industry to talk about mental health and to talk about suicide prevention. We're not doing anything, as far as I'm concerned, we're not doing enough to talk about death and other forms of grief. So that's kind of the big picture of how I got into this and what I'm doing with it now.
Well, so the first thing I'm going to say is I am so glad that you saw that opportunity to help your friend, and that it's blossomed into so much more that you're able to do. Just first and foremost, secondly, you talked about how grief is really awkward, and that is such a that's such a perfect way to put it. I've shared with this show before how when you're grieving, there feels like a sense of otherness almost, right? You you almost feel like, okay, everybody can see it on me, and I just don't feel comfortable in any one setting. And it sounds like your friend was experiencing that, and I think it's a lot more common than we think it is. It's one of those aspects that we don't really think about, with the grieving process. If you're prepared to grieve, I've lost grandparents and knew that it was going to happen. There are certain things that you go through to try to prepare yourself. Um, that was not one that I was ready for. That the inherent awkwardness of telling somebody that somebody's passed away, or that you are grieving something or someone, and just it just hangs in the air, right? And then when you're the person who gets told, I think everyone, your senses, you want the person to feel better, but you are not prepared for this. We don't walk around in the world ready to help people, it feels like. And I don't think it's through lack of compassion. I think it's through lack of knowledge. So I'm just gonna circle it back to, I am so impressed with the fact that your first thought was, I've got to help my friend, and I'm gonna go to every resource I can. And that it wasn't an A to B necessarily, but just the path that got you to what you're doing. And then now that you've taken it into this professional setting, because I know that's dangerous
Yeah.
work that they do, and it's probably hard to have that in the back of your head of like, okay, this is dangerous work. Somebody could lose their life doing this, or could lose a loss of function.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're honest
So
about it.
the timing of our interview, Andrew, is interesting to me because on April 28th we just celebrated Workers' Memorial Day, and that's a day that I celebrate. That's the wrong word. I'm sorry. It's the day that
No.
we honor those who have lost their lives in a workplace accident.
Yeah, I don't think celebrate is necessarily the wrong word. I think I get that honor feels right. I understand how celebrate,
Yeah.
again, awkwardness, celebrate can feel awkward, but celebrating the people and who they were, I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think.
So I think in this work, so we talk about the awkwardness, and we don't know what to say, we don't know how to act, and this is both sides. Okay, I'm the person
Yeah.
who's grieving. I loved your statement of a sense of otherness, right? We feel like we have this kind of cloud around us that it's just weird. And I'll tell you that I've heard stories of people who go back to work, and Sue was telling me that somebody saw her walking down the hallway, panicked, and went the other way. Like, now,
Oh my god.
the and it's not out of a lack of compassion. It's
No.
that freak out response, like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say, because people don't know what to say. They're so afraid of saying something that's going to make us cry, that's going to kind of spur some kind of an emotion, and they want to avoid that. They want to be comforting. So instead of putting our feelings aside, we we take our feelings and we run away. I've had other people tell me that they've gone back to work and nobody has said a word. Nobody has even acknowledged the fact. One person lost her mom. She was like, I went back to work and nobody said anything to me. It was like I walked in and everybody was just acting normal, but they weren't normal. It was awkward. It was weird. No, I can't believe that nobody, not a single person, not even HR, said anything. I can't
There's
even imagine that. So how do you go back to work and perform? And don't get me on the soapbox here. I won't stay on here long.
Oh, that's fine.
Bereavement leave, right? So
Yeah.
so thankfully,
It's a joke.
thankfully Sue's organization, her school, allowed her to do a special project. that she was not required to be back on campus every day, teaching every day. And that was really helpful for her. She did have to go back onto campus on a regular basis, but not teach and go through all of that. So, but 3 days of bereavement leave, 5 days if you're lucky, there's so
Yeah.
much that has to happen, especially if it's somebody that's close to you. I mean, if you lose a spouse, a child, a parent, whoever it is, there's so much that you have to do.
You're not grieving during that time. You are trying to get all the you're trying to get arrangements made. You're trying to I've seen family members, whenever someone's lost, it's like, okay, I have to plan the funeral. I have to get people to come into town. I have to then worry about them
Yeah.
and their arrangements and making sure you haven't had the time to. And I'm going to jump on the soapbox with you, so I hope there's room. You then have to try to find the time during all that to say, how do I get back to a normal life? And oh, my 3 days, my 5 days are up. I've got to go back to work tomorrow, and I haven't even begun to
Yeah.
process this. So yes, that is a
Yeah.
soapbox worth
And
standing on.
and I have to take additional time off to meet with the lawyers, to meet with the accountants if you
Yeah.
have them. Hopefully there's some kind of end of life documents in order. I have to take time off to contact the cable company and the cell phone company and to try to get, my person off of the account. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on of how much time this takes to get through that. And every time you have to call the telephone company again to remind them, stop sending me the bills because my person is no longer living. You're just resurfacing that grief just kind of keeps coming back over and over and over again. So again, the more that we can,
It's like
yeah,
picking at a
yeah,
scab, and I'm sorry for the gross visual, but
yes.
really that's what it is. It's never getting a chance to properly heal because we're not able to take the time to just leave it or to
Yeah.
focus on it.
So for our listeners out there, please, 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 if you do not have your end of life documents in order, get them in order now, please, because you can save you're not going to take away the grief, but you can help to reduce the stress that accompanies the
Yeah.
after, because all of those things of having to kind of close accounts and do all of that, it's so stressful, and it doesn't allow the person grieving to actually grieve and work through their journey.
Yeah, and I'll be completely honest. I'm bad about that too. Um, I need to do that, and this is gonna sound really weird or uncomfortable or
Awkward.
awkward. We'll use that word again. Yeah, I host a show that talks about grief. I've been doing this for a year, and I've talked a lot about death in the last year. I am scared and terrified of passing away, and there is, and I'll admit this. There's an inherent. I am afraid to do the will and go through all the planning because of that fear of death, and I'll call myself out. I know that I need to do it, and it's something my wife and I have talked about, and we will do. Um, but yeah, I'll fully call myself out. It is awkward, but it is hearing you say that and remind that there is a lot of there's a lot of administrative red tape that comes with somebody
Yep.
passing away, and can you get rid of some of it
So my
beforehand?
dad uh, refused to do a will for years because to him it was the admission of death. And
Yeah.
I think at one point my mom had one written up and just forged his name. We've since we've since gone through, and gone to see a lawyer and, have all of those, documents taken care of. But, to this day, my parents turn, I believe, 85 this year. And to this day, my dad keeps threatening that he's going to live to 100. Um, so-
I like that he says it as a threat.
oh no, that's what my brother and I say. My oldest brother is the caretaker, full-time caretaker for my parents. So, we just keep, joking that oh gosh, he just keeps threatening to live to be 100 years old. And
It looks spite is an incredibly powerful motivator.
yes, yeah,
I don't I don't think there's much I would have done in my life if not trying to spite someone else.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
um, I want to ask you this. So, I don't want to, in respect of her privacy, I don't want to focus too much on their friend and how things
Sure.
have gone since then. But for the organization that
Mhm.
you work with, the people that you work with, how have they responded to the work that you've been doing? In in the
So
conversations you're trying to have.
I actually just started. I kept this very private for a long time. Again, since June 2022, it's not even been a year. I actually kept
Yeah.
it private probably until the beginning of this year. I didn't say anything to anyone because I wasn't sure what to do with it. I started a Facebook group called Your Grief Matters.
Yeah.
I started a business, Your Grief Matters. I I haven't done a website or anything with it yet. Again, because I'm just kind of transitioning into it. As far as the construction sector goes, I wasn't sure like what to do or how to get into it. So um, I wrote a proposal. The National Safety Council of Northern New England is hosting a conference in May, and I wrote a proposal to do a workshop at this conference. And a colleague of mine, one of the trainers that I hire for
Yeah.
the construction sector, he sat on the board that was reviewing the proposals. And the president of the organization, from what I understand, looked at the proposal and is like, well, what if only two people go? And he's like, well, then there's going to be three people. My friend, my trainer said, well, then there's going to be three people because I'm going to go. Because he said, this is a really important topic. We need to talk about these topics in our industry. And, again, mental
Yeah.
health, suicide prevention. I think that they were concerned that my conversation might be too close to some of the other topics, but it got pushed through. So the good thing is that this is going to be my first kind of official presentation for the construction. Well, it's more than construction. I believe it's construction, manufacturing, mining. It's going to be safety professionals, managers, and I'm going to be talking how it's a hidden safety risk. That grief is a hidden safety risk, and really trying to get people to understand, number one, what is grief? What do we grieve? And then talking about just a few types of grief. I mean, we know there's, I think close to 20, right? I think only two of them are in the DSM 5. But looking at only a handful of those types of grief, and then looking at what is it that we can do to support people who are grieving, both from the uh, like the coworker side, and then me as the person who's grieving, understanding that I may have to, if I lost someone or if I'm grieving something, whatever my loss is, I have to be able to find my voice and tell people what
Yeah.
I need. And that's not easy because we don't know what we need, but this is kind of the conversation that I'm going to be having. So I'm really excited to have that opportunity. This again, we talked about the timing of this being interesting because of the Workers Memorial Fund. This weekend, also, there's a walk in Washington. My friend Sue was there in Washington, and she was. Oh gosh, what was the name of it? I'm sorry, I'm drawing a complete blank right now. She was talking about the Wingman Foundation. So
Yeah.
the Wingman Foundation, they have a walk every year for fallen airmen and women. So it says to honor the sacrifices of our fallen air warriors and support the families they've left behind. So this weekend seemed to be kind of filled with these types of memorial honoring services.
And I'm so glad that they do these things to try to, because it's remembrance is I think one part of it, but I think such a large gathering of people who've been impacted by it, there has to be this sense of, okay, if anyone in the world can have a clue of what
Yeah.
I'm feeling, these are those people.
So a lot of what I've heard in conversations that I've had, both in coaching and just regular conversations, is the one of the greatest fears is they don't want their person to be forgotten.
Yeah.
So having these types of memorial services, these days to be able to honor those who've lost their lives is really, really important to make sure that we continue to honor the life and the legacy of those who have lost their lives, especially those who have served our country.
Yeah, you want people to know
Yeah,
they existed.
yeah,
They were here
yeah,
and they
yeah,
mattered.
yeah, yeah. Um,
I well, I'm glad that she had that. I will say too for the conference, I am
Thank you.
congratulations one. Um, I am happy for you. I'm happy for the people that are going to attend as well. In my professional life, I work in the utility industry, so there is a lot of. I will say I am not frontline in the field, doing the dangerous work, and I will call that out right away. I don't want any type of I won't claim the same risk that they have. But seeing in the years that I've been there, I've seen where we've lost employees
Yeah,
in accidents and people I've never met, and it's still every time I've ever heard it, it still hits me because I'm like, okay, this is some. There is a certain camaraderie of just of working for the same place or going through some of the same things, but knowing that people that work at the same place have come to work and not been able to leave in the
yeah.
same. Yeah,
And it's also, even if it wasn't with your particular organization, if you heard something in the news, you still have that heartache because you have a
yeah,
sense of, oh my gosh, somebody in my industry just lost their life, right? So there's that kind of collective grief. Like we know that there's a commonality in that. So, I
yeah,
every time I hear of a workplace accident, loss of life, it just kind of spurs that emotion of sadness and empathy.
yeah. That's why I'm really thankful. My employer is a huge focus on safety and
Yeah,
just how important that is because it's like you said, it's always a reminder that these
yeah,
things can happen, and most workplace accidents are
yeah.
completely
And
preventable. It just
the
it
construction sector,
Yeah,
we do so much. There's so much focus on safety. I'd say
yeah,
that, for construction, manufacturing, mining, there's so much. We've got people, their full-time job is safety. There's degrees that you can get in safety, and that's who they hire. They hire safety professionals. And
yeah,
sometimes, I'd go back and say, okay, so what's going on in that person's mind? What's the distraction, right? So I see grief as a distraction. Distraction is a safety risk.
and I so that focus of grief as a distraction makes perfect sense because it feels like a haze over your mind, right? That it's hard to think or process clearly, and and this is not a fault of anyone who's grieving, but it is hard to make informed decisions or make a split-second decision when you feel like you're in
Yeah.
that fog.
I think the official term is grief brain. Or brain fog, right? Right. I mean,
And
yeah. I mean, they brain fog,
yeah,
grief, brain. It's real. I mean, there's actual,
yeah,
and I can't pretend to speak to the science of it, but there's actual things that go on in our brain. Our brain actually responds to grief in a similar fashion as it responds to trauma. So we have that fight, flight, freeze reaction to it.
yeah. Well, I appreciate you talking more about it from an industry
Thank
standpoint
you.
what you're doing. I
Yeah.
do want to shift a little bit to a personal standpoint because I know we talked too about your personal journey with grief, and you had a kind of a different or a
Yeah.
different take on it that I wanted to hear more
So
about.
your podcast, every episode that I've listened to so far, everyone that I know about who's kind of in this grief space that I'm in right now, it's because of loss of life, right? Um,
Yeah,
I'm trying to also spread the word that grief is far more than loss of life. It's experiencing any kind of loss that causes us that emotional those emotional stressors. So my grief journey is a little bit different. So unlike most of your other guests, I haven't lost someone. So I'm not grieving
Yeah.
loss of life. Um, I'm not quite sure that I'm grieving. Maybe I'm in denial. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm heartless. I don't know. But I don't
Yeah.
feel that I'm in that full on grief state. However, um, there is something that's called anticipatory grief. And that's just like it sounds, you're anticipating the loss. So
Yeah.
I guess my story with that is, I had mentioned a little bit earlier that my oldest brother, God bless him, is the full time care provider for my parents. My dad, virtually healthy, probably starting in early stages of dementia. We would refer to that as, maybe some mild cognitive impairment. Still very functional.
Yeah.
Might have some, physical challenges. Had a hip replacement. Kind of limps and whatnot. But he's doing all right. Farmer. My dad grew up. He's very much like a farmer. He's got 100 and some odd acres in Vermont. He, goes out and hops on the tractor and, plows the fields and, does all of this. So it's my mom. My mom, 5 years ago, I would have said my mom has mild cognitive impairment. And up until maybe 6 months ago, I would have said, oh, my mom is showing signs of dementia. It
Mm.
wasn't until my aunt, who is her sister, my aunt, I believe she was the head nurse at an Alzheimer or a memory unit in a hospital. So she knows this stuff. She knows the science behind it. She actually referred to it as Alzheimer's. And the first time I said that, like my mom has Alzheimer's, man, that stung. It's like, wow, that's difficult to say.
I imagine it's like getting. It feels like getting hit in the
It
chest.
is. It's like that punch in the gut. It's like, wow, you hear about it, right? People have cancer, they have Alzheimer's, they have, these um, diseases, these illnesses, and it's like, wow, my mom, my mom has Alzheimer's, and I would never have said it had my aunt not said it. I would have still to this day I'd be saying my mom has, dementia. So her
Yeah.
her Alzheimer's, I don't understand the stages of it. I would say she's probably in the mid stage of it. So I am extremely grateful that she's not angry. She can still carry on conversations. She knows who I am. She knows who my brother and my dad are. She may not know who her grandchildren are. Um, she may
Yeah.
not know who some people are when they come up, but her attitude is so incredibly positive. And
I
I
love that.
can't help but express my gratitude for that. Like when people say, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, yeah, but you know what? I'm fine with it because my mom's happy. She's my mom has a lot of energy, and part of the frustration is that where they live, there's not a lot around them. So it's not like she can go out and do a lot of things, and she's lost her sense of um, not independence, but security. Like she's very insecure when it comes to having to do things with other people. So she's much better one on one. That's kind of a shift in her personality that I've seen. So going to a senior
Yeah.
center and doing something at a senior center is not something she's going to be comfortable with. But she loves to walk. So she walks up and down their very long driveway, um, hours on end. And it's great for her. Keeps her physically active. It makes her happy. And she's constantly expressing, geez, somebody else. I know a lot of people my age who couldn't do this. So that's it's lovely to see that she's where she's at, and I'm I'm grateful she still remembers who I am when I call. And she'll say, oh, thank you, honey. I'm so glad you called. I just love it. I just love it when you call. And it's usually 30 minutes of her talking about three different topics within those 30 minutes, and I listen. And every once in a while, I'll throw in the, that's great, you know? So it's it's fun to see how joyful she's finding life. So that's why I think I'm not that's why I feel like I'm not grieving. However, I do anticipate, I know at some point my mom, there may come a point where my mom's not going to remember who I am, and I'm going to have to be okay with it
Oh,
because it's not she's not remembering me intentionally. It's just part of what happens in the brain.
yeah, it's not
Oh
an
gosh,
intentional
no.
thing. Yeah,
No.
I mean, but I will say this. So I'm glad though that see and acknowledge that it is a thing that at
Yeah.
some point will happen, right? You know, it's like you said, grief. There is this idea of okay, preparing yourself almost. You know, and I am so thankful to hear that she is in a position where it sounds like it's not a sharp decline. It sounds like she's it sounds like I guess she and you all have adjusted kind of well, and I mean, and she the fact that she's finding
Yeah.
joy in things that that's very special, and I am so
So
happy
one of
for
the
you.
things, I know that your podcast is about, our last meal and
Yeah,
kind of transitioning into that. I think about, one of the reasons that I reached out is one of the things that she has lost is the ability to cook and the ability to bake. She
yeah,
loved to bake, and she baked all the time. Just because, again, it gave her something to do. And a few years ago, maybe not, maybe as few as 2 years ago, she was still baking. She always wanted to make sure that, my brother had banana bread. She's always, got a pie going or some kind of a cake. And then I have another brother who lives in the area. And when he comes up to plow the driveway, oh, I've got to make sure that he's got cookies or a pie or a cake. Always something. When my husband and I go to visit, she's like, oh, Eric's going. I got to make sure I've got a berry pie for him. Just constantly, right? So baking for other
yeah,
people gave her such joy. Well, um, what we started to notice was that the cooking and baking was becoming, it could become dangerous. So they have a gas stove and a gas
yeah.
oven,
That's
and I was trying to. This was early on. It's like, Mom, you can't store anything in the oven. It's dangerous. And this is when we started to notice some decline. And she said, well, I've always done that. Oh, okay, but we can't do it anymore. And it's it's not safe because she would turn the oven on, and if there's something in there, and it may not be something, it could have been she didn't do it, but she could easily have stored a cake in the oven on a paper plate with plastic over it
yeah,
in a gas stove or a gas oven.
yeah, or a pot of
Yeah.
grease.
So
I've seen that.
trying to make sure that she didn't store anything in the oven. So trying to build that habit first and foremost. Trying to build a habit not to store anything in the microwave. Um, and trying to make sure that she understands, even to this day, she still uses the microwave, but making sure that she understands that you can't put a metal bowl in the microwave. So what we've had to do is start having these conversations to say, if we catch her with a metal bowl going into the microwave, to say, oh, hey, Mom, you know what? We can't put this type of bowl in the microwave. And her response is, but I always have. I've always used this bowl in the microwave. So it's okay. But this is a new microwave and things have changed. So we have to change that. So we can't put this bowl in the microwave because it's new. So we had to have these conversations. We have to had to have conversations about the stove. One of the things. that I did, because it's a gas stove and the handles on the stove, you can knock them easily and the gas just starts to leak out. That's dangerous, especially when you go to light
Yeah.
the pilot and it kind of explodes, right? So, what I started to do was I took white stickers and I put them on the handle of the knob so that I could see from a distance where the stove was, what if it was on, if it was off a little bit. Like, I wanted to make sure that when she walked away from the stove, that it was actually off.
Mm.
Eventually we had to take the handles off, which was sad.
Yeah.
But so here's where the transition is, right? So she's, we went from keeping an eye on it to taking them off, and now again, thankfully because of my brother, we've convinced her that you cooked and baked for everyone all of these years. Let us do it for you now.
It's our turn.
And she, at first,
Yeah.
she's a little pissed off, right?
Well, if she's so
Yeah,
used to providing,
yeah.
it's
The kitchen is
understandable.
my domain, right? And now all of a sudden we're taking it away. So now we have her convinced that it's a good thing. Just you sit down, you be like, you know what, you help set the table. And this is something that was kind of a transition from my brother to, because she wants to be there. She wants to be in the kitchen. She wants to be involved. So he's found ways to keep her involved, to keep her in the kitchen, but also to keep her out of the way. So,
Yeah.
here, mom, peel these potatoes, or, cut these things up. So she can do things like that. Um, she can set the table. She can do things like that. She'll get the drinks ready and whatnot. So she's able to still find that joy in the kitchen. Um, when she was baking, one of the things that we started to do in kind of that transition phase, because she was having a hard time following the recipe. So what I did is I created a spreadsheet, and anything new is a challenge, right? So I created a spreadsheet that had little boxes that she could make a dot for each time she made her favorite recipes. Apple pie, banana bread, apple crisp, you name it, whatever her favorite recipes, we printed them all out and made it so that every time she added the ingredient, she would just put a little dot there or a check mark. And that worked beautifully for a while.
Yeah.
And then eventually that started to become a challenge for her because she couldn't remember if she did the check mark or not. But the beautiful thing is that we make sure that we never tell her that it's wrong. Um, my brother, who will come up to do the plowing or whatever else around the house, when it's like, here's a pie, or here's some cookies, and for a while he was saying, is it okay to eat? Because you might get a cup of
Salt instead
sugar
of
instead
sugar.
of a cup of flour. You might get way too much baking soda and not enough. So, um, but it keeps her busy. So we still do that. So, um, good.
I well, I love that though. I mean, you're not trying to keep her safe, but also being respectful of the fact that she's an adult, she's a human, she has these things that matter to her. I love that you're all treating her with dignity and
Absolutely,
respect.
absolutely, and
You know.
we take the measures to make sure that she's still involved. So they process honey.
Yeah.
That's difficult. It's heavy, so they've got these big pots. You have to boil it. You have to put it into the containers. You have to boil the containers. Do all of this whole process. And sometimes when she gets bored, she wants to process honey. So again, we don't want her doing that by herself because she'll forget that she's got a pot of honey on the stove, and man, when that boils over, It is not fun to clean up. And
Oh
she
Lord.
feels bad. So, and she'll beat herself up. So we do everything. We take all of these measures to make sure that she's still able to to participate, but not owning it all because it's
Yeah.
dangerous.
It sounds like it's trying to
Yeah,
find a balance between making sure that she doesn't feel like she's been babied or infantilized, and I don't know that I used the
yeah,
right word there, but we'll go with it. But also making sure that everything
yeah,
stays safe.
yeah. And my brother does a great job. He'll, hey mom, I need to make some banana bread. So why don't you come into the kitchen and help me? And he'll give her the measuring cup. I need a cup of flour, and this way he has some quality control. But again, she still feels like
Yeah.
she's participating and helping out.
Well, and I think too that sounds like a nice memory. Of a nice. It sounds like it's a way to have a nice memory during a
Yeah,
difficult time.
yeah. It is.
You know,
It is.
because
It's beautiful that I'm hoping that for my brother, when because he will continue to make the banana bread for himself, that when he does that, every time he makes that banana bread, he's going to be honoring her.
yeah, and you just got to the heart of a big part of what the show means to me, and the two I've always said two things that everybody has in common is you have to eat. You are going to lose people that you care about, and it's not to oversimplify. It is not to be um, negative, but
Yeah,
it's the truth. We've all got to eat. We're all going to lose people. We are going to have foods that we
yeah.
associate with people.
I will I
And
will forever associate a teaspoon of peanut butter with chocolate chips thrown out on the counter, and you take the teaspoon of peanut butter and you just slap it onto the chocolate chips and eat it that way. Now, because
no, I'm not judging you. I love
it is
chocolate and peanut butter.
amazing.
I'm actually I'm mad I've never thought
So,
about this.
so I grew up with three older brothers, and it was me and my mom, my dad, and my three older brothers. Well, as a teenager, when those times of the month would come along, and my mother and I would be having chocolate cravings, my mother she'd say, "I'd walk backwards on my hands to the store to get a candy bar right now," right? So my mom always has chocolate chips. To this day, she always has chocolate chips in the house. Of course, now we're not always sure where the chocolate chips are because, with Alzheimer's, things don't always end up where they would normally. So
Yeah.
that becomes a fun game for my brother and I. So, they may be in the refrigerator, they may be in the cabinet, but regardless, there's always chocolate chips. And when we would have our chocolate cravings, if there wasn't a candy bar around, she'd be like, "Okay, let's go." And we'd take the peanut butter, and we'd have chocolate chips on the counter, and we would just take the peanut butter and slap it on top of the chocolate chips, and that would be our chocolate craving.
Please understand, I'm not judging you right now. My all-time favorite
Yeah,
candy is Reese's. So chocolate and peanut butter, I'm a big
yeah.
fan of this, and I've eaten peanut butter straight out of the jar. I've eaten a handful of chocolate chips before. I'm really mad I never thought
You've
to just put
got to
them
put
both
them
together.
together. It's the best, and I do it to this day. I don't keep chocolate chips in the house because I can't have, I don't want them in the house. But
Right.
I do have other chocolate. I'll take a dark chocolate, and I'll do that every once in a while. If I need that kind of sweet craving, that's my go-to is the chocolate and peanut butter. But that's one of those things that I will always think of every time I have chocolate and peanut butter. I'm thinking, of me and my mom. Me as a teenager, and the two of us kind of sitting there, spoonfuls of peanut butter and chocolate chips.
You see, but and I've spoken about this before, but this is a perfect way to describe that. Comfort food doesn't mean that it's really fancy or that
Mm.
it's really nice or that it's this big 7-course meal. A comfort food is a teaspoon of peanut butter and chocolate chips. It is a bologna sandwich. It is macaroni and cheese, or it is whatever you find comfort in because it
Yeah.
reminds you of someone. That is a comfort food to
So
me.
so I'm going to take a little sidestep here. when we talk
Yeah.
about foods and the remembrance of food, right? So, my husband, he's still with us. Um, but I love sharing this story. And if he's in the other room listening to me, he's probably going to yell. But um, my husband is 6'4". He's very lean, and the junk food cabinet is above the refrigerator, or excuse me, above the microwave. I'm 5'1", right? If I want to get into the junk food cabinet, I need to climb onto climb onto a stool to get in there. Well, he used to travel a lot for his work, and I was craving something sweet one night, and I thought, you know what? He's got Oreo cookies. I'm gonna get myself a big glass of milk and some Oreo cookies. Now, if somebody told me that I could never have another Oreo cookie in my life, I'd be fine. It's not something I'm not even sure I like them. It just
Same.
it's too much sweet. But I thought I want Oreo cookies. So I get my stool, climb up, grab the container out of the cabinet, go to open them up. Andrew, there's one cookie. I Who does that?
At that point, eat the last
Exactly.
cookie.
So I called him up and I was like, who the F leaves one cookie? Well, what? He said, I said, why? He said, well, because I ran out of milk. I'm like, that help me with this logic here. I don't understand. So I, the story cracks me up because we laugh about it to this day. And this was probably 10 years ago that this happened. So I think about that story all the time. I think about who the f leaves a single Oreo cookie. Nobody, and who can eat just one Oreo cookie. So
I'll just have one Oreo cookie and
yeah,
be like, all right, I'm
no,
good.
yeah. So I'm thinking, moving forward, if in the event my husband passes before me, one of two things is going to happen next time I go to the grocery store. I'm going to be walking down the cookie aisle, and and this is where, like, grief, we don't talk about grief, people just think that we're crazy, right? Because if you're grieving, you're not crazy, but your reactions may show that,
Yeah.
display that. So I'm either going to be in a puddle on the floor crying hysterically because I just saw the overstuffed Oreos, and I'm gonna be, somebody at the
Yeah.
grocery store is gonna be going, clean up in aisle 7, right? Or they're gonna have to remove me because I'm gonna be standing in the aisle laughing hysterically
Yeah.
because of these memories, because that's what food does to us, right? It's
Yeah.
it's the memories, it's the smells, it's the taste, it's even the visual representation of it. You if you have that memory of the Oreo cookie and there it is, you're gonna have that that
It's a
memory that
visceral reaction.
hopefully makes your heart smile.
Yeah. You It's funny you say that you share that story. So I told you I think earlier that my grandmother
Yeah.
passed in December. So it's just only been a couple months. And I've shared on the first episode of this podcast. I talked about how growing up I would always have a little Debbie donut sticks at her house, and they're not good. They're incredibly sweet. But when you're a kid, there's no such thing as too much sugar. So my cousins and I, we all loved them as kids. And even now as an adult, every so often I'd get them because it just grandma, it makes me think about her. She passed in December, and about a month or two later, I was there's a gas station near my house that I popped in to pick something up, and there was an older woman there who looked like she was in her 80s, and she just trying to figure out what she was wanting to do and get. I tried to help her a little bit. It's already making me think about my grandmother, and it's already because it's still raw, it's still fresh. Um, I tried to be as nice to her as I could and help her with whatever she was trying to figure out with the the drink fountain. And then I'm standing in line to pay for whatever I'm going to get. And I look over and there's one of these racks of all the different, they always put the sugary stuff right up front trying to get you to buy something. And I saw a pack of donut sticks and I just kind of I chuckled to myself for a second kind of bit my lip and was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna get these tonight. I need this right now." So all that to say, very long winded. I'm sorry, but you're right. It is weird how the food will give you a
Yeah,
reaction, and you don't know what it's gonna be, and sometimes life just kind of things just kind of come
yeah,
together.
yeah. I know that every time have something with maple syrup, I will have some kind of a reaction. My dad, for years, processed maple syrup. So,
Oh, so you're used to the good stuff
that's
then,
the
like real.
only kind of stuff that I'll have. Anything else, I can't do it. I just sinful. No,
Yeah,
no.
that's
You need to have the real stuff. And for me, I like like the grade B syrup, what they would call a grade B, which is a darker syrup. That to me is so much nicer than the grade A fancy. The grade A fancy is it's too light, too watery. I like the robust flavor of syrup. And my my mom used to use maple syrup all the time to make frostings. She'd make some muffins, and
yeah.
she'd always make a maple syrup frosting with it. And I don't know. Have you ever had sugar on snow? Have you ever heard of that?
No.
When I was little, we used to go over to my grandparents' house in the wintertime in Vermont. And they had a big hill, and all of the kids, we'd go sledding and whatnot. And then we'd come back in, freezing faces red and whatnot. And we would have sugar on snow. They would take piles of fresh snow, put them in a bowl, and boil maple syrup and put it on top of the snow. And the syrup,
Okay.
the reaction of the hot and the cold would make the maple syrup kind of gooey or crystally. It would melt so
Yeah.
you'd be able to eat it with a spoon for a while, but eventually the snow would melt, and then you would just be you'd just be drinking, watery maple syrup. But as kids, we loved it. And, good job, mom and dad. Do that at 8 o'clock at night after you've come in after a night and expecting us to go to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll go lay it down, but I'm not going to sleep.
bed. But yeah, that was a treat. Sugar on snow.
So I know we've had a snow cream before, which if you've never had, snow cream is
No, I
really
don't know
good
what that
too.
is.
It's essentially it's just making ice cream with snow.
Oh, okay.
You know, I live in North Carolina, so we don't get a ton of snow. So when you do, it's a big deal, and it's okay. We got to try to find a way to enjoy it. So snow cream, if you ever get a chance, um, yeah, it's just a fun way to enjoy the winter.
Snow cream. Hmm.
Um,
I wonder if it's similar. I'm thinking, maybe it's a similar concept. I don't know, but yeah,
that's what I was thinking. It's snow and
yeah,
sugar.
yeah. Snow and sugar. Go home,
Um,
kids. Go to bed. Yeah,
yeah. Well, see, here's what you do: is you do it in like the middle of the afternoon. That way, they get the sugar rush, and then they're ready to crash later.
yeah.
You have to. I've learned having a 6-year-old, you have to kind of
Oh, yeah.
plan the sugar. You got to get it just right. If you don't thread the needle, they're gonna be up until
Yes,
midnight.
yes, yeah. I have grandchildren, and we make sure that we make sure that we get them all good and sugared up before we send them home.
Yeah, as a parent, I know that all too well.
Try to avoid that, yeah. But then again, I grew up in the era that if I had a really bad cold, my parents thought nothing of throwing a little bit of whiskey in with honey and lemon. And
Yeah,
giving us some hot
but
tea with just a little tiny bit, to kind of help, clear the lungs and probably shut us up and put us to sleep. I don't know if you can do that nowadays, but
so I've never tried that. We do. So I know I got really sick with a flu about a decade ago, and everyone was telling me just try some rock and rye, which is just rock candy and
mm,
rye whiskey. Yeah, um, which I'm not a fan of. If it had been bourbon, I may have taken them up on it, but not a big fan of
yeah,
rye.
that would make perfect sense. Yeah.
If nothing else, you'll sleep. Well, Taylor, before we wrap up, I wanna ask anything else that you wanted to share related to grief. I do have one final question for you, but I'll save that to the end.
I think that any message at all is just Start talking about it. Start getting your end of life documents in order. Start talking about the fact that it's not a fun conversation, but nobody gets out of this game
Yeah.
alive, right? We all die. We all grieve, and grief is way more than just death. And that's the other thing, is to be aware of that, to be aware that when a pet passes, that's also another great form of grief. Andrew, you can see all of the cats behind me. That's kind of representation of
Yeah.
of all the pictures on my wall of the pets that we've lost. And I just think that grief is something that we need to be more aware of. We need to live each day with more compassion, kindness, empathy, gratitude, and love. That's really just, we have no
Yeah.
idea what people are carrying with them when they show up. And if we can have a little bit better sense of that compassion and empathy, we could literally save a life. We could be the reason that somebody continues on. We could be the reason that we could make somebody smile that day. So I really just think it's it's about living a life, trying to live your life with love.
Yeah.
That would be my big message.
I think that's a good message. So the last question, and thank you for that, by the way. So the last question I have, I always ask a guest when they come on if they had a chance to have one more meal with someone they've lost, whether through death, through relationship ending, what would that be? Thankfully, that's not the case for you. So you still have a ton of
Yeah.
meals left to have with your mom, and I am happy to say that. I know you said that she can't get in the kitchen and cook and bake the way she could before. If you could have her make one more thing for you though, what would you want?
Huh. I'd want her to take out the jar of peanut butter, hand me a spoon, dump the chocolate chips on the counter, and say, "Have at it." I'd want that experience with my
That's
mom. And you
perfect.
know what? I think the next time I go up to Vermont to visit, that's what I'm gonna do. Whether or not she remembers it, I'm
Please
gonna
do
say, "Hey,
that.
mom, let's have some chocolate and peanut butter."
Even if she doesn't remember, she'll enjoy the
Absolutely.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Jennifer, thank you so much for
oh,
coming on
thank you
today.
so much, Andrew,
Um,
for this. I truly, truly enjoyed our conversation, and I love everything that you're doing with this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Before I let you go, is there anything that you want to promote? I know you said you've got the Facebook group that you have. You've got Your Grief Matters. Anything that you want to promote for anyone who's maybe interested in learning
Well,
more?
I have to kind of give a shout out to our friend Nikki Smith, the death doula. She's, the
Yeah.
reason that you and I kind of got together here. So, thank you, Nikki Smith. I'd say, there's so many other resources out there. There's the help texts, there's Compassion and Choices, which is another great organization that helps people with their end of life planning. So there's so much out there, and I'm still learning every day of all of these different resources that are out there. So I would say, if I'm going to promote anything, just join the Facebook group if you're on Facebook, Your Grief Matters. Or you can always reach me at yourgriefmatters@outlook.com. I don't have all of the answers, but part of my role, I feel, is to help people find them. So to be a resource for people so they can make informed decisions.
Perfect. I will make sure to link to both of those in the show notes. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you, Andrew.
Bye. Thank you again to Jennifer for talking with me about her path to becoming a grief coach. I say this a lot, but Jennifer was such a pleasure to talk with. I really feel like this show has drawn such wonderful people to it, and I consider myself so fortunate that I get to interact with them. And I'm just happy I can add Jennifer to the list now. If you or someone you know is struggling, please don't suffer alone. Please seek support, please seek community. Know that grief is a normal process, it is a reflection of love. And as hard as that might be, it's the truth. And I want you to find support. I'm going to link to Jennifer's Facebook page, to her email. I'm sure that if she's not able to help you, that she'd be happy to help find someone that can help. And again, I just encourage you, try to find help wherever you can. If you're interested, if you would like to, you can subscribe to Our Last Meal wherever you listen to podcasts. I would ask that you please take the time to rate and review. Please take the time to just share with others if you can. And if you want to interact, social media, anywhere, Our Last Meal Pod, or you can visit ourlastmeal.com. If you'd like to come on the show and talk with me, you can reach out, DMs on any of the social media, or ourlastmealpod@gmail.com. Or click on the share your story button at the top of the page at ourlastmeal.com. This is not done for profit. This is, like I said at the beginning, a labor of love. This is a passion project. So just please understand, I don't do any of this for anything other than trying to have conversations with people. Until next time, please take care of yourselves, and please share a meal with someone you care about.